It's the Wednesday Wisdom Show, and you need to know, is science catching up to Kabbalah? When you say Kabbalah to somebody, the thing that is generally evoked in them is that, well, it's mysticism, right? Now, that's the way that people understand all kinds of things that seem to go against their current framework, their reason about how things happen. You know, what's cause and effect, what's actually there compared to how much of it we can see. And we take the framework of this world as being the sum total of what reality is, and we don't normally look very deeply into why it appears that way to us, okay? So when you hear things or you read things or somebody reports to you about some larger reality or some other way of looking at cause and consequence that may not be the way that we have it, we tend to think of that as like tinfoil hat type of stuff, that it's mystical, that it's not based in a common reality at all. The person who says this is crazy, and the sources that they're quoting are equally crazy. But even in our material world and on our shared understanding of what reason is and what reality is, there's a constant change that happens. And otherwise technology, amazing technology, wouldn't constantly evolve and break down barriers of separation or redefine the way that we look at what's near and what's far, what connections actually exist when or even all of the time. So Kabbalah began and evolved as a science and matured at a much earlier stage in human development. So the language that it used to speak about things that aren't in normal human perception, that are sort of at the edges of it and that have got to do with our evolution and development, the purpose of human life, the way in which to connect and synchronize with this development, didn't have the benefit of the type of material science bases on which all of these things could be pegged, like we have now. We have a current scientific method that uses physical examples and experiments to exemplify forces. That is, it shows us there's something at work here. We try to figure out if it's repeatable. We say, well, the nature of this force is like this, and we can estimate that it's going to act in a certain way. And we have a lot of what we think of as physical or reasonable data. Kabbalah had to engage the human heart and mind in a different kind of science that didn't require the physical basis, but gave people access directly to sensing those forces. And the people at that time were closer to nature and far more able than we are now. So that's why there's this huge discrepancy. And they're talking about the same things. They're actually talking about the same things with an addition of purpose, right? Because current science can tell us what and how, but it can't tell us why. Because the why part of it has got to do with the intentional level of existence. Science doesn't even look at that. Now, let's just hold that for a sec. Now we're seeing with some of the development that science is getting to, that they're beginning to bump up against the necessity to say why about some of the things that they're finding, because they're getting down to the granular places, to the very limit of human investigation by using reason, right? So I want to read you an article, or parts of an article, from the newsroom of the University of New South Wales in Sydney. And the headline is, "Our brains reveal our choices before we're even aware of them." This is from a study. So this goes to free will, where it actually exists in people, and it goes right to the edge of what this is, but then it begs the question, well, why is that? And that's where Kabbalah comes in. This was written by Lachlan Gilbert. This is the March 6th, 2009 edition of the UNSW newsroom. We like to think that we're in the driver's seat when it comes to the choice and strength of our everyday thoughts. But the research from UNSW suggests that they might be more automatic and unconscious than we think. A new UNSW study suggests that we have less control over our personal choices than we think, and that unconscious brain activity determines our choices well before we're aware of them. Published in the prestigious Nature journal today, an experiment carried out in the Future Minds Lab of UNSW School of Psychology showed that free choices about what to think can be predicted from patterns of brain activity 11 seconds before people consciously chose what to think about. The experiment consisted of asking people to freely choose between two visual patterns of red and green stripes, one of them running horizontally, the other vertically, before consciously imagining them while being observed in a functional magnetic resonance imaging, an MRI machine. So they're looking at brain patterns, and they're asking people to make a choice between a vertical arrangement of lines and a horizontal arrangement of lines, and they're looking at the brain activity and timing it against their responses. Not only could the researchers predict which pattern they'd choose, they could also predict how strongly the participants were to rate their visualizations. That is, how much of an impression they had of their own sensation of it. And with the assistance of machine learning, the researchers were successful at making above-chance predictions of the participants' volitional choices at an average of 11 seconds before the thoughts became conscious. Now, there's a lot more to that, and it gets kind of technical. Now, that's a very recent study, but not the only one, and there's another study which also appeared in the journal Nature in 2008 on exactly the same thing, but it used different methods and so on. And one of the researchers are quoted as saying, "We think our decisions are conscious, but these data show that consciousness is just the tip of the iceberg." This is John Dylan Haynes, a neuroscientist at Max Planck Institute for Human Cognitive and Brain Sciences in Leipzig, Germany, who led the study. He says the results are quite dramatic, and 10 seconds is a lifetime in terms of brain activity. Okay, so Kabbalah tells us in its scientific language that free will is not what we think it is. It isn't situated where we imagine it is, and that the desires that we have are given to us by a larger system. And our thought processes, our decision-making processes, really arise out of the nature of the desire. The desire is always aimed at some kind of a deficit, something that we don't have and that we need. But the process is not arranged in a way that we think about something and then we have a desire to get that thing. First we think, what should I desire? And then a desire arises and then we go get it. But actually it's arranged in an opposite way, in that a desire appears inside of us from a larger system, a kind of unity, a general field of connection, and then a thought process, which is an operating system, is built up around it and guides us towards the understanding of how that can be fulfilled. I say understanding, Kabbalah says understanding, because none of these things that we're speaking about exist as objective realities outside of our experience. They're all happening inside of us. So that sounds like mysticism, right? But what these studies are showing is that indeed the choice the thing and the choice are already decided for us. And yet we get to have a kind of a response that's fulfilling. We get to feel that we want these things that are being presented to us. They build in us in such a way that we feel that the decision is ours when in fact it isn't. Okay, so that's not free will, is it? But that's not the place in which free will is situated in human experience. This is what Kabbalah means when it speaks about the intentional level of existence, and that's where all real life exists, and that's where our experience of pleasure or pain, good and bad, and the both in terms of what we feel and the outcome in our general surroundings are determined there, because we don't get to choose what it is that we're making the choice about. We don't even get to choose what we choose. What we do get to choose is what our response is going to be. Are we going to synchronize with this system? And on the intentional level, which is completely free here, are we doing it for the system? Are we doing it to synchronize with the development along which we are being led, or not? Because we can be dragged towards something and have a very unhappy experience and actually not evolve except by extreme situations and by pain and by being pushed. Or we can, on the intentional level, embrace the evolutionary force and the beauty that's unfolding in front of us. You see, we just don't have a sense. This is 11 seconds. I find this very, very surprising. When I first looked at the headline, I thought they must be talking about 11 milliseconds, where there's a gap so small that's why we don't sense that we're actually not making the decision in that place. But no, this is 11 seconds, an entire process. Like he says, it is a lifetime. And yet we still maintain this illusion that all of this originates in us, and the event begins and ends with our thought and our desire. But the why of all of this is really the issue. You can look at all of it, and you have to ask yourself, why is it built this way? What does having a reality built in this way achieve? What does it lead to? It leads us to escape the illusory aspects of our life. That is, those things that they're autonomic for us, just like the beating of our heart or the sense organs. They all happen without us giving them commands. So do all of the events in our lives. But the place in which fulfillment and happiness and development happens is on the intentional level. It doesn't detract in any way from the fullness of experience that we have. A rich world that seems to be in an enormous universe, reaching forever in every direction, and apparently free will everywhere. But our happiness is not determined by those things. Our happiness, the well-being, our own well-being and the well-being of the people around us, and all of the levels of nature are really determined by our desire to synchronize with, to know, to get into that gap, and to embrace life that's coming towards us with as much love as it's aimed at us. That doesn't happen in our reason. Our reason is good, but it happens in our intention. For whom and for what? We are returning an embrace that's being given to us by the general field of nature. And that general field is supplying us with the most beautiful and loving experience possible. But so far, it's an unrequited love. And love happens only in that decision to give back that embrace and engage in exactly that same intention and emotion. So yeah, science is catching up, and it's helping us understand in a way that we couldn't before how very real the unreal and unseen world is, that it's more real than the one that we generally take, and that we're very close to it and we have access to it. That's what Kabbalah is about. It teaches us how to jump the gap from what to why and then how.